Welcome back to Afro-Korean Narratives. If you watched part 1, you already know what happened to Nari Townsend. You watched her fall. You watched her survive. You watched her walk into a room full of people who erased her and speak her name back into existence. But here's what you don't know yet. The people who pushed her off that building, they didn't run. They didn't hide. They hired lawyers. And 3 days after the gala, they told the world that Nari was the villain. What happens next is something I couldn't have written if I tried. Let's begin. The woman with the manila envelope found Nari in the cereal aisle of a grocery store on Clark Street at 9:14 on a Tuesday morning. She was ordinary, mid-40s, friendly smile, the kind of face you would trust if she asked you for directions. She approached Nari casually and said, "Nari Townsend?" with a voice so pleasant it could have been offering free samples. Nari turned. She was holding a box of oatmeal in one hand and her phone in the other. Her natural coils were pulled back in a loose twist. She wore gray joggers and a white t-shirt, the uniform of a woman still relearning what ordinary mornings felt like. The thin white scar above her right eyebrow caught the fluorescent light. "That's me." The woman held out the envelope, still smiling. "You've been served." The envelope was in Nari's hand before the sentence finished. The woman turned and walked toward the exit, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, her body already forgetting Nari existed. Nari opened the envelope standing between the oatmeal and the granola bars. The document inside was 46 pages. The header read, "Park Family Holdings LLC versus Nari Townsend." The number at the center of the first page, formatted in clean legal type, was $25 million. $25 million. From the family that pushed her off a 47th floor terrace. From the woman who commissioned a fake video and hired a man to send Nari over a railing while 200 people danced inside. From the son who took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on her 8 weeks before the engagement party and called Declan Marsh 18 seconds before the push. For intentional infliction of emotional distress on Vivian Park, who, according to paragraph 19 of the complaint, had suffered severe psychological trauma from false accusations made publicly by a woman she had welcomed into her family with open arms. If you've been following Afro-Korean narratives, you know we don't do stories that let you breathe. If you're new here, welcome. Like and subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what's about to happen to this woman will keep you up tonight. Trust me on that. Nari read paragraph 19 twice. Welcomed into her family with open arms. The arms that had arranged the fake video. The arms that had positioned 6 witnesses at the study door. The arms that had followed her onto the terrace and stood with cold composure while Declan's hand hit the center of her back and sent her into the Chicago sky. Open arms. The oatmeal box hit the floor, not because she dropped it in shock, but because her hand made a decision her mind hadn't authorized. It simply opened, released the weight, prioritized. She stood in the cereal aisle and read all 46 pages. Her eyes moved at the speed of someone accustomed to absorbing information under duress. She had spent years reading patient charts during emergencies, decoding physician shorthand while alarms screamed. Legal language was slower, but the principle was the same. Find the threat, assess the damage, determine the next action. The threat was comprehensive. Harrison Webb, the attorney whose name appeared on every page, was not a family lawyer. Nari searched his name on her phone while standing in the aisle. Harrison Webb, senior partner at Webb, Castillo & Price. Political fixer. Crisis management. His client list included a pharmaceutical CEO who beat a wrongful death suit and a sitting congressman whose campaign finance violations became a footnote instead of a conviction. He was not a man you hired to win in court. He was a man you hired to win everywhere else, in the press, in public opinion, in the specific court of human judgment, where narrative mattered more than evidence. The Parks had hired the best liar money could buy, and they were pointing him directly at Nari. The complaint described Vivian's distress in clinical detail: sleep disruption, anxiety, a paragraph about how the gala incident had caused her to question her personal safety. The word family appeared 14 times in the filing, as if the machine that produced fake videos and hired men to push women off terraces was a family. As if the woman who had whispered, "You should have let him go quietly," before watching Nari go over the railing, was a mother experiencing distress. $25 million. Nari had never held more than $3,000 at one time in her entire life. She had once cried in a pharmacy parking lot because an antibiotic cost more than she expected, and the gap between what insurance covered and what her body needed was $64 she did not have. And now a document on creamy legal paper was asking her for $25 million because she had stood in a room and told the truth about what had been done to her. She called Sojin from the parking lot. He answered on the first ring. "They filed," she said. Her voice was flat. "Not defeated, flat in the way a blade is flat, surface calm hiding an edge that could open anything. I know, Junho flagged it 20 minutes ago. Webb filed in Cook County at 8 this morning. He scheduled a press conference for noon. A press conference. He's not litigating, he's narrating. The lawsuit is the headline. The press conference is the story. By tonight, every outlet in Chicago will have a version where you are the antagonist, and Vivian Park is the victim." Nari leaned against her car. The parking lot was filling with morning shoppers pushing carts through the June sunshine, their lives continuing in the ordinary way that lives continue when someone else's world is collapsing 10 parking spots away. "What's the angle?" she asked. "I'll know more after the press conference, but the filing gives us the shape of it. They're claiming you fabricated evidence, conspired with a criminal organization, meaning me, to stage a public attack on a charity event, and that the gala appearance was designed as intimidation and harassment." Fabricated evidence? The evidence we showed was real. Reality is not Harrison Webb's concern, narrative is. He doesn't need to prove the evidence was fake, he needs to make enough people believe it might be. That's a much lower bar. The sun was warm on her face. 3 days ago, she had walked into a ballroom and spoken truth to 300 people, and felt, for the first time since the terrace, like the ground beneath her was solid. Now the ground was moving again, shifting, opening. "Nari? I'm here." "Come to the office, not the safe house. The office downtown." "Why?" "Because Harrison Webb is about to tell 300 million people that you're a liar, and we need to be ready before he opens his mouth." She put the groceries in the car, drove north. The oatmeal box was still on the floor of aisle 7. The manila envelope sat on the passenger seat like a passenger. Heavy, present, taking up space it had no right to occupy. She drove with both hands on the wheel, and her jaw set in the particular way it locked when something enormous was happening, and her body was processing it faster than her mind. The Chicago skyline grew in her windshield. Somewhere in that cluster of glass and steel, Harrison Webb was preparing to stand in front of cameras and explain why a woman who survived being pushed off a building was actually the villain. Somewhere in that skyline, Vivian Park was selecting the outfit she would wear to look sympathetic. And Nari drove toward the only person in the city who had never asked her to be anything other than alive. Harrison Webb held his press conference on the steps of the Cook County Courthouse at noon. He stood behind a polished wood podium his firm had transported for the occasion, wearing a navy suit that cost more than Neri earned in 2 months. His silver hair was groomed with military precision. He was a man who understood that credibility was a performance, and every detail mattered. Neri watched it from Sojin's 16th floor office on a laptop screen. Sojin stood at the window. Junho sat in the corner, arms folded. Webb spoke for 11 minutes. He did not raise his voice. He did not display emotion. He constructed a narrative the way an architect constructs a building. Load-bearing statements supporting a conclusion that felt inevitable by the time he reached it. His version. Nari Townsend, a former caregiver with a history of unstable personal relationships, had become obsessed with her ex-fiancé, Jun-woo Park, after their engagement ended due to personal incompatibility. Rather than accept the conclusion of the relationship, she had connected with Kang So-jin, a known figure in organized crime, and together they had orchestrated a campaign of harassment, culminating in the disruption of a charitable event attended by 300 Chicago civic leaders. The evidence displayed at the gala, Webb stated, was fabricated. Doctored documents presented without context, designed to humiliate a family that had done nothing more than end a relationship that wasn't working. The so-called push was fiction. Nari had left the engagement party voluntarily after an argument and had spent 3 months in the company of a man whose organization had the resources and the motive to construct exactly this kind of public spectacle. His closing line was surgical. "This is not a love story. This is a calculated attack by a criminal enterprise on a philanthropic American family using a vulnerable young woman as its weapon." Webb took no questions. A publicist distributed printed press packets, photographs of Vivian at charity events, statements from Park Foundation board members, a timeline that erased every detail that mattered and replaced it with a story so clean it gleamed. By 2 o'clock, the story was on every local news outlet. By 4, it had gone national. The headline variations were slight, but their direction was uniform. Ex-fiancé accused of conspiracy. Charity gala disrupted by crime links. Park family sues woman who claimed she was pushed. Claimed. That word did more damage than the lawsuit. Nari sat in Sojin's office chair and watched her own face appear on screen after screen. Not the face from the gala, composed, scarred, powerful. A different photograph. Someone had found her old social media. The picture showed her at a barbecue 2 years ago, eyes half closed from laughing, a plastic cup in her hand. It looked reckless, irresponsible. Exactly the kind of photo that made a vulnerable woman look unstable when placed beside the words organized crime and fabricated evidence. Her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. She answered anyway. "Miss Townsend, Reagan Calloway, Channel 7 News. We'd love to get your side of..." She hung up. It rang again. Different number, same request. And again. And again. Sojin took the phone from her hand and powered it off. "From now on, all communication goes through a lawyer." "I don't have a lawyer." "You do now. Her name is Yuna Pak. Criminal defense, civil litigation, former federal prosecutor. She's been on retainer with my organization for 8 years and she has never lost a case that mattered. I can't afford." "Don't." His voice was quiet, but it closed the sentence like a door. "We are well past the question of money." By evening, the damage was structural. Nari's photograph was on 4 national news websites. Her name was trending on social media. The comments beneath every article were a masterclass in the cruelty that strangers perform when given permission to judge someone they've never met. "She's clearly unstable. Look at her eyes." Another gold digger playing victim. Why would a rich family push some random caregiver? Use your brain. She probably faked the whole thing for attention. 300 people had watched her walk into a gala with a scar on her face and evidence on a screen. 300 people had seen Vivian's color drain and Junwoo's glass shatter. And now, 72 hours later, a man in a navy suit had stood on courthouse steps and turned the woman who survived into the woman who lied. Harrison Webb had not disproven a single piece of evidence. He had not addressed the payments to Declan Marsh. He had not explained the fake video, or the hired actress, or the erased security footage, or the insurance policy with double payout for falls. He had simply talked around all of it with enough confidence that the absence of rebuttal felt like rebuttal itself. In Rogers Park, a news van parked outside Nari's old apartment building. She hadn't lived there in months. The lease had lapsed while she was recovering. But the camera crew didn't know that. They filmed the building's exterior. They knocked on doors. They asked neighbors questions. Miss Odessa answered her door in a housecoat and slippers and stood 5 feet 1 inch tall in front of a camera and a microphone and said, "That girl is the kindest soul I have ever known in 70 years of living. And if you put one wrong word about her on television, I will find every single one of your mothers and tell them what you do for a living." The clip did not air, but someone recorded it on a phone, and it would matter later in ways no one expected. At 8 that evening, Junwoo appeared on camera. Not a press conference, an interview. Soft lighting, a living room setting designed to feel personal and intimate. He sat in a leather chair wearing a simple sweater, no suit, his hands folded in his lap. His eyes, the kind eyes Nari had once trusted, were red-rimmed. Not from crying, from the eye drops his team had administered 20 minutes before filming. "I loved her," he said, his voice breaking on the second word with practiced precision. "I genuinely loved her. When our engagement ended, I was heartbroken. I thought she'd move on. Instead, this." He gestured vaguely, let his hand fall. "I don't know what she's been told. I don't know what this man has put in her head, but the Nari I knew would never have done this." The Nari I knew. 4 words that repackaged a man who had insured his fiancée for $500,000 and called her killer 18 seconds before the push. Into a heartbroken ex-lover bewildered by the woman he once cherished. The interviewer nodded sympathetically. No follow-up questions about insurance policies. No mention of Declan Marsh's payment. No reference to the evidence projected on ballroom screens in front of 300 witnesses. The interview aired at 10. It was shared 40,000 times before midnight. Corinne Webb, Nari's best friend, the woman who had braided her hair for the engagement party and cried when the world said she jumped, did not answer her phone. Nari tried 3 times that evening. 3 calls, 3 voicemails, 3 silences that hurt worse than the lawsuit, because Corinne's silence was not strategic. It was confused. It was the silence of a person who loved Nari, but had just watched television tell her that the friend she mourned might be something other than what she believed. Harrison Webb's greatest weapon was not the lawsuit, it was doubt. A single drop of doubt in the right relationships could dissolve years of trust in hours. He knew this. It was the only tool he needed. 3 days after the press conference, at 2 in the morning, Minji called Seo-jin. He was at the safe house, not inside. He had returned to his old habit of parking across the street, though now for different reasons. He sat in the dark sedan, watching the second-floor window where Nari's light was still on. She wasn't sleeping either. Neither of them had slept properly since the lawsuit landed. "I found something," Minji said. Her voice had the particular flatness it carried when she had discovered information that changed the shape of a problem. "You need to see this in person." Sojin drove to Wicker Park. Minji's basement apartment smelled like cold coffee and ozone from overworked hardware. 3 monitors glowed. She did not greet him. She turned her chair toward the center screen and pointed. "I've been running background on Harrison Webb's other clients, looking for patterns. The way the Parks hired him, the speed of it, Webb was retained the morning after the gala. That's unusual. Most families in crisis take a week to even find counsel. The Parks had him by 9 a.m. They had him on standby. Exactly, which means they anticipated the gala might happen, or they had Webb on retainer already. So I pulled his billing records, don't ask how, and found something. Webb's firm has billed the Park family before. 7 years ago. A different matter. She clicked. A billing summary appeared on screen. Park Family Holdings LLC, dated 7 years prior. The matter description was vague. Personal consultation, reputation management. But the billing amount was significant. Over $400,000 for 7 months of work. What was the matter? That's the interesting part. 7 years ago, Junwoo was engaged to a woman named Priya Mehta, 27 years old, Indian American, elementary school teacher in Evanston. The engagement lasted 5 months. It ended suddenly. No public explanation. Priya moved away, changed her last name, stopped teaching. Sojin was very still, the kind of still that preceded earthquakes. She disappeared, he said. Not physically. Socially. I found records of a restraining order filed against her by Vivian Park, alleged harassment, alleged theft of family property. The restraining order was granted without contest because Priya didn't show up to the hearing. Her teaching license was suspended 3 weeks later, based on a complaint filed by a parent who, and this is where it gets interesting, doesn't appear to exist. The name on the complaint doesn't match any parent in the school district records. A ghost complaint filed by someone with access to the school district's reporting system, or by someone who paid for that access. I pulled the timeline. The restraining order, the license suspension, the complaint, all within a 6-week window. The same window where Webb's firm billed $400,000 in reputation management services. They didn't just end an engagement, they dismantled a life. Priya went from employed teacher with a clean record to unemployable woman with a restraining order and a suspended license in less than 2 months. Sojin's jaw tightened. The muscles along his temple made the scar shift. A small movement that Minji had learned to read as the distance between processing information and acting on it shrinking to 0. Where is Priya Mehta now?
Milwaukee, living under her mother's maiden name, working as a private tutor. No social media, no public presence. She erased herself.
Or was erased?
Same result. Different architect.
Silence. The monitors hummed. Minji watched Sojin the way someone watches a machine calculating. Vivian has done this before, he said. It was not a question. The pattern is identical. Son brings home a woman who doesn't fit. Mother eliminates the problem. The method varies. With Priya it was legal and social destruction, with Nari it was physical, but the architecture is the same. Webb is the contractor, Vivian is the client, and the outcome is always complete erasure. Priya didn't fight. Priya was a 27-year-old elementary teacher, going up against a family with organized crime connections and a $400,000 attorney. She did the math. She ran. Sojin stood. He walked to the narrow basement window and looked out at the brick wall of the adjacent building. Not seeing it, seeing 7 years into the past. Seeing a young teacher whose life was dismantled by the same machine that would later send Nari over a railing. If Priya Mehta will testify, he said slowly, then Nari's case is no longer he said, she said. It's a pattern, and patterns are what juries believe. If she'll testify. She's been hiding for 7 years. She won't be easy to reach. Send Osei. Randall Osei, 61 years old, retired CPD detective. The kind of man whose face made people feel safe enough to tell the truth. Tell him to go to Milwaukee. Don't call first, show up. Bring nothing threatening, no documents, no recordings. Just a conversation. And if she says no, then we respect that. We have no right to draft someone else's trauma into our fight. He paused. But tell Osei to mention one thing. Tell him to mention that there's a woman in Chicago right now, 29 years old, with a scar above her eyebrow and a $25 million lawsuit in her name, who is fighting the same family that destroyed Priya's life. And she's not running. Minji nodded. Her fingers were already on the keyboard. Sojin drove back to Wilmette, 3:30 in the morning. The safe house windows were dark now. Nari had finally turned off the light. He sat in the car for 7 minutes. He did not go inside. Not because he couldn't, because the information he now carried was the kind that changed the temperature of a room when you walked in, and she deserved one last night before the conspiracy doubled in size. Tomorrow he would tell her everything. Tomorrow she would learn that she was not the first woman Vivian Park had decided didn't fit the spreadsheet. That 7 years ago, another woman had been erased. Not from a building, but from a life. And that the machine built to destroy Nari had been tested, refined, and perfected on someone else first. His phone buzzed. A text from Ose. Heading to Milwaukee at dawn. I'll call when I know something. Sojin looked at the dark window one more time. Behind that glass, behind those curtains, in a borrowed bed in a house she never chose, a woman who had already survived the impossible was about to learn that the fight she thought she'd won was only the beginning. That the machine built to destroy her had been assembled 7 years before she ever met Junwoo Park. That it had been tested on a woman who liked teaching children and had lost everything for the crime of being loved by the wrong family's son. Priya had run. Nari had not. And that difference, that single, stubborn, terrifying difference, was the reason Vivian Park had hired Harrison Webb at 9 in the morning, 72 hours after a gala where Truth walked through a door in a black dress. Because Vivian understood something that most people never learn. The only thing more dangerous than a woman who falls is a woman who gets back up. And the only thing more dangerous than that is a woman who gets back up twice. He started the engine, drove south. The highway was empty at this hour, and the Chicago skyline rose ahead of him like a city full of secrets that were just beginning to surface. Randall Osai found Priya Mehta on a Wednesday afternoon in a public library in Milwaukee's Bayview neighborhood. She was sitting at a table near the children's section with 2 students, a boy and a girl, both around 9 years old, their backpacks on the floor beside their chairs. She was helping them with fractions. Her voice was patient, warm, the voice of a woman who had been built to teach, and who still did it even after the system that certified her had been corrupted to take it away. She wore a navy cardigan over a simple white blouse. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid. Her face was kind, the specific kindness that comes from people who have survived cruelty and decided not to pass it forward. Osei waited. He sat at a nearby table with a newspaper he didn't read, and watched her work for 40 minutes. 31 years with the Chicago Police Department had taught him that the difference between information and truth was time. You could get information in seconds. Truth required sitting still long enough for the other person to decide you deserved it. The students left at 4:15. Their mother collected them at the entrance, waved to Priya, called her Miss Nita, the name she lived under now. Not Priya Mehta. Nita Sharma, her mother's maiden name, a name with no restraining orders attached to it and no suspended licenses and no connection to a family in Chicago that had compressed 3 years of her life into 6 weeks of destruction. Osei approached her table after the children left. He stood at a respectful distance and said, "Miss Mehta, my name is Randall Osei. I'm a retired detective from Chicago. I'm not here to record anything. I'm not carrying documents. I would like to talk to you, and if at any point you want me to leave, I will leave." She looked at him. Her hands went still. The color in her face shifted, not dramatically, but subtly. The way someone's color changes when a door they thought they'd locked 7 years ago suddenly opens. "I don't use that name," she said quietly. "I understand. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important."
She studied him for a long time. Osei had a face that invited trust. Wide-set brown eyes, gray at his temples,
Deep lines around his mouth that came from decades of listening to people tell difficult truths. He did not rush her. He held her gaze with the calm steadiness of a man who had sat across from hundreds of reluctant witnesses and understood that the most important skill in his profession was not asking questions, but creating the silence in which answers chose to emerge. "Sit down," she said. He sat. He told her about Nari. Not the gala, not the evidence. He started with the parking lot. A woman who sat on cold concrete beside a stranger and asked about his grandmother's name. He told her about the engagement party, the fake video, the terrace, the fall, the survival, the erasure, and then the return. A woman in a black dress walking into a ballroom with a scar above her eyebrow and truth on her tongue. Priya listened without interrupting. Her knuckles whitened as the story progressed, but her face remained composed. She had been composing her face for 7 years. When Osei finished, the library was quiet. The afternoon light had shifted from warm gold to the deeper amber of approaching evening. Someone was returning books at the front desk. The ordinary sounds of a public library continuing its ordinary purpose, while something extraordinary unfolded at a corner table near the children's section. "She survived," Priya said. Not a question. A statement she needed to hear herself say out loud. She survived. And she went back. She walked into a room of 300 people and named what was done to her. Priya's composure held for 3 more seconds. Then her eyes filled, not dramatically, not with the theatrical tears that television demanded, but with the specific moisture that comes when someone who has carried something alone for 7 years discovers they are not the only one who was carrying it. "Vivian told me I was mentally unstable," Priya said. Her voice was steady even as her eyes glistened. She said it to Junwoo first, then to the school district, then to the judge. She never raised her voice. She sat across from me at a restaurant, a public restaurant, so there would be witnesses to her composure and my distress. And she said, "Priya, I think you need help. I'd like to pay for your treatment." She offered to pay for my destruction and framed it as generosity. "The restraining order was based on emails I never sent," Priya continued. "They were fabricated. Vivian's people accessed my email account and planted messages that made me look obsessive and threatening. The judge read them and granted the order in 15 minutes. She paused, looked at the children's section where her students had been sitting an hour ago, trusting her with their education, because they didn't know that the woman teaching them had once been told she wasn't fit to teach. The school complaint was the worst part, not because it ended my career, although it did, because it was filed in the name of a child who didn't exist. Someone invented a parent and a student and used them to accuse me of inappropriate behavior. The investigation found nothing, but the complaint stays on your record. The suspension stays on your record. And when you apply for a new position, what they see is not the outcome. They see the accusation. Accusations are permanent. Junwoo visited me once after the restraining order. Stood in the hallway because the order meant he couldn't come inside. He said he was sorry. He said his mother had gone too far. He said he would fix it. She almost smiled. He never came back. 2 weeks later, I left Chicago. I left my apartment, my friends, my car, my name, everything. Did you ever consider fighting? With what? I made $42,000 a year. Vivian had Harrison Webb. She had fabricated evidence. She had a judge who believed her. And she had something else. Something I didn't understand until just now, listening to you tell me about Nari. What? Experience. The operation was too smooth, too practiced.
The emails, the complaint, the restraining order. It moved like a machine that had already been built.
I wasn't the prototype. I was the upgrade. The library's overhead lights buzzed softly. Outside the window, Milwaukee's evening traffic moved past in its ordinary rhythm. There's a woman in Chicago, Osei said carefully, 29 years old, with a scar above her eyebrow and a $25 million lawsuit in her name. She is fighting the same family that destroyed your life, and she is not running. Priya looked at him. Something behind her eyes had shifted. Something dormant for 7 years, buried under a false name and the exhaustion of pretending that what happened didn't happen. What does she need from me? The truth. Your truth. On the record. The silence lasted a full minute. Osei counted it. He had learned that silences after important questions were where real decisions lived. I'll need to think about it. Give me a week. Osei stood. He placed a plain white card on the table. His phone number. Nothing else. Just 10 digits and the implicit promise that the person attached to them would answer. He was at the library door when she called after him. Mr. Osei! He turned. Tell her she's not alone. Tell her there were others. And tell her I'm glad she didn't run. Nari was not sleeping. She had not slept more than 3 consecutive hours since the lawsuit landed, and the sleep she did get was interrupted by the specific kind of dreams that come when your nervous system has processed danger twice and is now waiting for the 3rd time with permanent alertness. She sat at the safe house kitchen table at 5 in the morning. The table that had served as a war room for months was now covered with a different kind of paper. Legal documents, media printouts, a growing file of online articles that Unipak, the attorney Sojin had retained, had compiled to map the trajectory of Harrison Webb's narrative campaign. The trajectory was devastating. In 10 days, Webb had transformed public perception with surgical efficiency. He had placed 4 additional interviews through surrogates, a Park Foundation board member expressing disappointment, a former colleague describing Junwoo as a devoted partner, a neighbor calling Vivian a gracious woman. None of them mentioned the push. None mentioned the fake video or Declan Marsh or the $8,000 payment or the erased security footage. If you're watching this and you haven't liked and subscribed yet, now's the time. Hit that bell. Because what Nari is about to discover will change everything you think you know about this story. Trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. The absence was the strategy. Webb wasn't denying the evidence. Denial would require engaging with it, and engagement would give it oxygen. Instead, he was building a parallel world where the evidence simply didn't exist, where the gala disruption was the act of a disturbed woman and her criminal handler, where Vivian Park hosted charity events and suffered beautifully, and the word push never appeared in any sentence attributed to any credible source. Unipak arrived at the safe house at 7. She was 44 years old, Korean-American, with a face that gave nothing away, and a mind that processed information the way industrial machinery processes raw material, rapidly, precisely, and with zero tolerance for inefficiency. She wore dark suits. She did not smile professionally. She had prosecuted federal racketeering cases for 9 years before entering private practice, and she approached Harrison Webb's media strategy with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining someone else's botched operation. He's good, Una said, setting her briefcase on the kitchen counter. He's very good, but he's made a mistake. Nari looked up from the documents. Her eyes were hollow from lack of sleep, but sharp. Fatigue had not dulled her intelligence. It had concentrated it, the way heat concentrates flavor. She was paying attention to everything because she could no longer afford to miss anything. What mistake? He's filed in civil court. Defamation. $25 million. He's counting on you not having the resources to mount a defense, which would result in a default judgment. But by filing, he's opened discovery. Discovery. The legal process where both sides exchange evidence. Webb filed this lawsuit as a narrative weapon. He wanted the headline, not the trial. But the lawsuit is real. It's in the system. And that means we have the legal right to subpoena documents, depose witnesses, and compel testimony under oath. Everything the parks have been hiding behind press conferences and publicists can now be requested through formal legal channels. Nari was very still. The kind of still that Sojin would have recognized. You're saying their attack gave us a weapon. I'm saying Harrison Webb built a door and forgot we could walk through it too. Yuna opened her briefcase. Inside was a draft of their response. Not a simple answer to the complaint, but a counterclaim, a legal document that would transform the parks from plaintiffs into defendants. The counterclaim alleged conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, obstruction of justice, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It named Vivian Park, Junwoo Park, Declan Marsh, and Harrison Webb personally. The moment we file this, Yuna said, the narrative shifts. Webb won't be able to control the story anymore, because the story will be in a courtroom, and courtrooms have rules. No publicists, no soft-lit interviews, cross-examination, sworn testimony, penalties for lying. Nari read the document, every page, every paragraph. Her finger traced the lines the way she used to trace patient charts, looking for the critical detail, the vital sign that would determine the next action. How long? 12 to 18 months for a full trial. But the subpoenas start immediately. We can have documents from Webb's firm within 60 days. The kitchen was bright with morning light. Outside the window, the Wilmette neighborhood was waking. Someone walked a dog past the house. A school bus rumbled in the distance. The ordinary machinery of ordinary life continuing, while a woman at a kitchen table held a document that could dismantle a criminal family's public legitimacy. Nari set the document down. She looked at Yuna with the expression that Sojin had seen in the parking lot 3 months before the gala. The expression of someone making a decision that could not be unmade. File it. Yuna nodded, picked up her phone. At 9:22 that morning, Yuna Pak filed the counterclaim in Cook County Circuit Court. At 9:23, she sent a copy directly to Harrison Webb's office with a cover letter that contained one sentence. Discovery begins in 30 days. At 9:45, Junho called Sojin. We have a problem. Sojin was at his 16th floor office. The call came through on his secure line, the one Minji had built with encryption that even federal agencies would struggle to crack. What kind? Webb filed a motion this morning to freeze Nari's financial accounts. The motion references specific transaction amounts, transfers I made to cover her living expenses and medical costs at the safe house. The amounts are exact. To the penny. Silence. The kind that precedes recalculation. Those transactions went through 3 layers of intermediary accounts, Sojin said slowly. There are exactly 4 people who know those numbers. You, me, Minji, and Dr. Yoon. I know. Someone talked. Someone talked, or someone's system was accessed. Either way, Webb has information he shouldn't have. And if he has the financial transfers, he might have more. The safe house location, the investigation files, Nari's medical records. Sojin stood at the window, the Chicago skyline stretched below him. The same skyline he had looked at 1,000 times. But the geography of the problem had just changed. The fight was not only external anymore. Somewhere in the tight circle of people he trusted absolutely, the circle he had built over a decade of careful, methodical relationships, there was a crack. A leak. A vulnerability that Harrison Webb had found, and was now using to feed the narrative machine that was grinding Nari into dust. Pull Minji in. Full diagnostic on every system, every device, every communication channel. I want to know where the breach is before the end of the day. And if it's not a system? If it's not a system, then it's a person. And if it's a person, I will find them. His voice was quiet, controlled. The kind of control that Minji had learned to read as the distance between processing information and acting on it shrinking to zero. Junho had served Sojin for 11 years. He had heard that voice exactly twice before. Both times, the person on the receiving end of whatever followed had not enjoyed the experience. One more thing, Junho said. Ose called from Milwaukee. Priya Mehta didn't say no. Minji found the breach in 9 hours. It was not a system. It was a person. She sat in Sojin's office at 7 that evening with her laptop open and the particular expression she wore when she had discovered something that was going to change the room temperature. Sojin stood at the window. Junho sat in the corner. Nari was not present. Sojin had not told her about the leak yet, and he would not tell her until he knew exactly how deep it went. Dr. Yoon, Minji said. The name landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples moved outward in every direction. Explain, Sojin said. His voice was even. His jaw was not. I ran a full audit on every device connected to our communications network. Phones, laptops, tablets, everything used by anyone in the inner circle over the past 3 months. Dr. Yoon's personal phone has been syncing with an external cloud account that doesn't match any of her registered services. The sync started 11 days ago, 2 days after the gala.
She was contacted.
She was contacted. I traced the external account. It's registered to a corporate entity called Northbrook Medical Consulting, LLC. Northbrook was incorporated 6 weeks ago. Its registered agent is Lyle Brennan. Lyle Brennan, the Park family's attorney. The same man who had structured the payments to Declan Marsh through Vivian's maiden name consulting firm. The same man who had built the financial architecture of Nari's attempted erasure. Brennan reached out to Dr. Yoon, Sojin said, through a colleague of hers at Northwestern Memorial, a surgeon she trained with 20 years ago. The approach was subtle, professional, not threatening. A medical consulting opportunity. Lucrative. The first payment was deposited 2 days before Dr. Yoon's phone began syncing. How much? $200,000. 2 installments. The first, for cooperation. The second, contingent on the delivery of specific information. Financial records, medical documentation, and the physical location of the safe house. Sojin's hand rested flat on the window glass. The city glowed below him. 72 stories of glass and steel, and the particular indifference that cities maintain toward the problems of individual human beings. Dr. Yoon Hae-won. 51 years old, she had served his organization for 7 years. She had performed the 6-hour surgery that saved Nari's life, working in a basement with equipment meant for a clinic because Sojin could not risk a hospital. She had kept Nari alive, monitored her recovery for 3 months, guided her rehabilitation, and 11 days ago, she had accepted $200,000 to betray the location and medical records of the woman she had saved. Has she delivered the safe house location? Sojin asked. Not yet. Based on the sync pattern, she's been transmitting documents in stages, financial records first, then medical files. The location appears to be the final deliverable. She hasn't sent it. When is it due? Based on the payment schedule, within the next 72 hours. Sojin turned from the window. His face was composed in the way that Junho recognized as the most dangerous version of composure. Not the absence of emotion, but the compression of it, forced into a space too small to contain it, held there by sheer force of discipline. She saved Nari's life, Junho said quietly. It was not a defense. It was a statement of the particular cruelty of the situation. that the hands which had stitched Nari's eyebrow and reset her shoulder and monitored her breathing through 3 months of recovery were the same hands now feeding her location to the family that had tried to end her. She did, So Jin said. And now she is selling it. The room was silent. Minji's laptop hummed. The city lights blinked beyond the glass. I want to know everything, So Jin said. Every document she's transmitted, every piece of information Brennan now has. And I want to know if the safe house is still secure, or if we need to move Nari tonight. The location hasn't been transmitted yet, but I'd recommend moving her as a precaution. Where? Minji had already anticipated the question. I have a property in Lincoln Park, residential. No connection to any business entity. 3 bedrooms. Secure, ready by midnight. Sojin looked at Junho. Junho nodded, the nod of a man who had already begun planning the logistics before the decision was officially made. Do it. And tell her the truth. All of it. She deserves to know that the doctor who saved her life has been compromised. I will not keep secrets from her. She'll want to know what happens to Dr. Yoon. Dr. Yoon will have a conversation with me tomorrow. The way he said conversation made the word mean something other than what it normally meant. At 11 that night, Junho arrived at the Wilmette safe house. Nari was awake. She was always awake now. She sat at the kitchen table with legal documents and a cup of cold tea she had not touched. We need to move, Junho said from the kitchen doorway. Nari looked up. Read his face. She had spent a career reading faces, the faces of patients, families, doctors delivering news they wished they didn't have to deliver. She read Junho's face in 3 seconds. Who? She asked. Not what happened, not why. Who? Because she understood already that the threat had come from inside, and the only question that mattered was which person she had trusted had been turned. Junho told her. He stood in the kitchen doorway and told her everything. The sink, the payments, the staged approach through a medical colleague, the $200,000, the documents already transmitted, the safe house location that had not yet been delivered but would be within 72 hours. Nari listened. Her face did not change. She sat at the table in the kitchen where she had learned to walk again, where Sojin had told her about the insurance policy and the 18-second call, and she absorbed the information that the woman who saved her life had been purchased. She stood, walked to the bedroom, packed in 7 minutes. She did not pack the cream shoe. She left it on the nightstand where Sojin had placed it months ago. It belonged to this house and to the version of recovery that happened here. In the car, riding through dark streets toward the highway, she asked Jun-Oh one question. Does he know? Jun-Oh glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She was looking out the window at passing houses, each lit with the warm glow of families who were not being relocated at midnight because someone they trusted had been bought. He knows. He's handling it. Handling it how? Quietly. Completely. And with the specific attention he reserves for people who threaten the things he cares about. Nari met his eyes in the mirror. He cares, she said. Not a question. Junho's hands on the steering wheel relaxed by a fraction. The kind of fraction only someone trained to read bodies would notice. More than he has ever cared about anything. And I have known him for 11 years. The highway opened before them. The Chicago skyline grew in the windshield, all light and glass and the particular beauty cities possess when you are driving toward them at midnight, with everything you own in a bag and a future you cannot predict waiting somewhere in the glow. Sojin met Dr. Yoon at the Wilmette safe house, the one Nari had left 12 hours ago. He chose the location deliberately. He wanted Dr. Yoon to sit in the kitchen where she had monitored Nari's recovery, where she had checked her blood pressure and adjusted her medication, and guided her through shoulder rehabilitation exercises while afternoon sunlight came through the windows. He wanted the room to remind her what she had done. Dr. Yoon arrived at 9 in the morning. She walked through the front door with the same composed professional stride she always used. White coat, practical dark hair, calm, focused eyes. She had been summoned by a text from Junho that said only, "Safe house, 9 a.m. Bring nothing." She walked into the kitchen and stopped. Sojin sat at the table where Nari had eaten her meals, where she had read the evidence of her own attempted erasure, where she had decided to walk into a gala and speak truth. The table was empty now, except for a single laptop, its screen facing Dr. Yoon. On the screen, her personal phone's sync log, the Northbrook Medical Consulting account, and the 2 deposit records totaling $200,000. Doctor. Yoon looked at the screen. Her face did not change, not immediately. The composure held for 3 seconds, the professional mask of a woman who had spent 25 years controlling her expressions in operating rooms where panic could end a patient's life. Then the mask slipped, not dramatically. A micro-adjustment around her eyes, a slight change in her breathing pattern, the kind of shifts that most people would miss entirely, but that Sojin, who had built an empire on reading the distance between what people showed and what they carried, tracked with absolute precision. "Sit down," he said. She sat. The chair was the one Nari had used during her recovery. The same cushion, the same position at the table. The symmetry was not accidental. "I'm going to ask you a question," Sojin said. His voice was quiet, not angry, quiet in the way that deep water is quiet. Surface calm concealing a current strong enough to pull you under and keep you there. And I'm going to ask it once. How you answer will determine everything that happens next. Dr. Yoon's hands rested on the table. They were steady. Surgeon's hands. Hands that had held Nari's collapsed lung together while working in a basement with inadequate equipment. Hands that had stitched the gash above her eyebrow with 23 careful sutures. Hands that had been purchased for $200,000 by the family that put her on that operating table in the first place. Why? The question filled the kitchen. Not, "What did you do?" or "How did they reach you?" or "What did you give them?" Just why? Because Sojin already knew the what in the how. Minji's audit was thorough. The question that remained, the only question that mattered to him, was the one that no data could answer. Dr. Yoon was silent for a long time. The kitchen clock ticked. Morning light moved across the floor in the slow migration pattern that sunlight follows when no one is watching. "My daughter," she said finally. Her voice was level, but the effort was visible in the cords of her neck. She was accepted to medical school. Johns Hopkins. Full tuition. She has wanted to be a surgeon since she was 11. Used to practice sutures on bananas in our kitchen. She paused. In April, a colleague from my residency at Northwestern called, said a consulting firm needed a medical expert. Standard work, good pay. I took the first meeting because I trusted him. Brennan. Not at first. The first meeting was with a woman I'd never seen. Professional. Asked general questions about trauma recovery timelines, nothing specific to Nari. The second meeting was different. Brennan was there. He knew things. My daughter's acceptance, the tuition, the loan applications. He knew my ex-husband had declared bankruptcy and that I carried full financial responsibility for her education. Her jaw tightened. The surgeon's composure was cracking along fault lines that had been there for years, held together by professional discipline and a mother's determination to appear stronger than her circumstances. He said the consulting fee would cover 4 years of tuition. He said all he needed was documentation, recovery timelines, treatment records, financial data related to patient care. He never used Nari's name, not once, He called her the subject, as if clinical language could make it something other than what it was. And the safe house location? I hadn't given it yet. That was the final deliverable. Due this week. She looked at the empty kitchen, the cupboards Nari had opened every morning, the counter where Sojin had gripped his knuckles white the night of the surgery. I was going to give it. I need you to know that. I was going to give it because I had already given everything else. And stopping at the final step would mean my daughter loses Johns Hopkins, and I have sold a woman's safety for nothing. The honesty of it was more devastating than any excuse would have been. Not defiance, not justification, just the flat, clear-eyed admission of a woman who had weighed her daughter's future against another woman's safety and made the calculation and was now sitting in the result. Sujin stood. He walked to the window. The Wilmette Street outside was bright with June morning light. A neighbor was watering flowers. A mail carrier moved between houses with the easy rhythm of routine. Your daughter will attend Johns Hopkins, Sojin said without turning from the window. Full tuition. I will cover it. Not because you deserve it. Because your daughter does. And because Nari would want it that way. Dr. Yoon's composure broke, not with sound. Her eyes filled, and her hands on the table curled into fists, and her shoulders dropped by an inch. The inch that separates professional control from human weight. You will provide a full, written account of every interaction with Brennan's team, every document transmitted, every meeting, every communication. Unipac will take your statement under oath. It will become part of the legal record. And after? After, you will not contact Nari. You will not contact anyone in this organization. You will not practice in any capacity connected to my operations. Your daughter will go to medical school and become the surgeon she was meant to be. And you will carry what you did here for the rest of your life without the comfort of punishment, because punishment would make it simpler than it is. He turned from the window, looked at her. Nari sat in that chair for 3 months. She ate oatmeal in the morning and Korean food at night, and she studied legal documents until 2 a.m. And she did shoulder exercises that made her bite her lip to keep from crying out. You watched all of it. You measured her blood pressure and her range of motion and her healing. And while you were doing that, you were selling the coordinates of her safety to the people who tried to end her. Dr. Yoon said nothing. There was nothing to say that the room did not already contain. Junho will drive you home. You have 48 hours to prepare your statement. She stood. Walked to the door. Stopped with her hand on the frame. For what it's worth, and I know it's worth very little, she was the bravest patient I've ever treated. And I am sorry. The door closed. The kitchen was empty. Sojin sat in Nari's chair and pressed his palms flat on the table and breathed in the particular silence of a room where trust had been broken and consequences had been delivered, and neither one had made anything feel better. Priya called on a Thursday. 6 days after Osei's visit. 1 day ahead of her own deadline. Nari answered the phone in the Lincoln Park apartment, the new safe house. Smaller than Wilmette, but clean and bright, with morning light that poured through east-facing windows. She had been there 4 days. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and the particular emptiness of spaces that have not yet been lived in. This is Priya Mehta, the voice said. Steady, careful. The voice of a woman who had rehearsed this call in her head for 6 days and was now executing the version she had decided on. I'd like to speak with Nari. This is Nari. Silence. 3 seconds of it. Long enough for 2 women who had never met to recognize each other across a phone line, not by voice, but by the weight of what they carried. The particular frequency of women who had been processed through the same machine. I've been thinking about what your detective told me, Priya said. About what happened to you. About the gala. About everything. Take your time. I've been taking my time for 7 years. That's what Vivian counts on. Time. Silence. The hope that if enough years pass, the truth rots and becomes something that can't hurt her anymore. A pause. The sound of breathing. The sound of a decision being spoken into existence. I'm done rotting. Nari's hand tightened on the phone. Not from grief, from recognition. The specific recognition of hearing your own experience reflected in someone else's voice, and understanding for the first time that your suffering was not unique, that it was manufactured, repeatable, a product that Vivian Park had refined over years, the way other people refine recipes or business models. I'll testify, Priya said. Whatever you need. Deposition, court, the media, I don't care. I spent 7 years being invisible because I thought that was the only way to survive. But you walked into a room full of people who were told you were gone, and you spoke your name. If you can do that with a scar on your face and the whole world calling you a liar, I can sit in a chair and tell the truth about what Vivian Park did to me. Nari closed her eyes, opened them. The Lincoln Park apartment was bright with morning light. Somewhere in this city, Vivian was adjusting her sleeves. Somewhere, Harrison Webb was billing hours. Somewhere, Junwoo was performing the careful pantomime of a man who had been wronged by a woman he never deserved. And somewhere in Milwaukee, a woman who had been erased 7 years ago was deciding to exist again. Then you, Nari said. Don't thank me. This isn't generosity. This is the first thing I've done in 7 years that feels like me. They stayed on the phone for another 12 minutes. They did not discuss legal strategy or timelines or evidence. Priya asked about the scar. Nari told her. The terrace, the awning, the 23 stitches, the way it had faded from angry red to thin white. Priya told Nari about the day she left Chicago. A Tuesday in October, 5 boxes in a rental car, her mother crying in the passenger seat, the Chicago skyline shrinking in the rearview mirror like something she was being swallowed away from. She said she pulled over twice on the highway, not because she was tired, because her hands were shaking too hard to hold the wheel. I thought about going back every single day for the first 2 years, Priya said. By the 3rd year, I stopped thinking about going back and started thinking about disappearing completely, changing everything, my name, my face, becoming someone Vivian couldn't find, even if she looked. She wasn't looking, Nari said quietly. That's the worst part. She wasn't looking because she didn't need to. She already won. She didn't win. She just hadn't lost yet. There's a difference. Nari called Unipack. Una called Osei. Osei drove to Milwaukee that afternoon with a recording device and a legal pad and the quiet patience of a man who understood that the testimony he was about to take would be the structural foundation of a case that could dismantle a family, a fixer, and a 30-year conspiracy. Priya's deposition took 4 hours. She provided everything: names, dates, the fabricated emails she had saved on a hard drive she'd hidden in her mother's garage for 7 years, because some part of her had always known that running was not the same as finishing. She had screenshots of messages from Vivian's phone that she had taken before the restraining order was filed, photographs of the fake parent complaint, and a recording, audio only, captured on her phone during the restaurant meeting where Vivian offered to pay for her therapy, in which Vivian's calm, measured voice could be heard saying, "This is about what's best for everyone, Priya. You must see that this relationship has no future. I'm trying to help you." The recording was devastating, not because of what Vivian said, because of how she said it. The warmth, the maternal concern, the absolute sincerity of a woman who had already filed fabricated emails and a ghost complaint, and was now performing compassion so convincingly that anyone watching would see a caring older woman helping a troubled young one. Una reviewed the deposition that evening. She sat in the Lincoln Park kitchen across from Nari and placed 4 items on the table. 1. Priya's testimony establishing a pattern of behavior spanning at minimum 7 years. 2. Dr.
Yoon's sworn statement detailing Brennan's recruitment operation, the shell company, and the payment structure. Evidence that the Parks were actively obstructing justice and tampering with witnesses in an ongoing legal matter. 3. The discovery documents arriving from Webb's firm under court order. Financial records showing the Hartley and Associates account had processed over $2 million across a decade. The account was Vivian's private operations budget.
It had funded everything: Webb's retainers, the fake video, the fabricated emails against Priya, the security manager's payoff, and payments to individuals Yuna's team was still tracing. 4. A motion Yuna had drafted that morning. A motion to add criminal referral to the civil case. A recommendation that the Cook County State's Attorney open a criminal investigation into Vivian Park, Junwoo Park, Harrison Webb, Lyle Brennan, and Declan Marsh for conspiracy, fraud, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. This is no longer a defamation case, Yuna said. This is a criminal enterprise. And the moment this motion is filed, Harrison Webb stops being their attorney and becomes their co-defendant. Nari looked at the 4 items on the kitchen table: evidence, testimony, documentation, legal action. The scattered pieces of a truth that had been buried, denied, attacked, and discredited were now assembled into something that could not be dismissed with a press conference, or a soft-lit interview, or a $25 million lawsuit designed to make a woman with $31,000 a year disappear under the weight of legal fees she could never pay. "File it," Nari said. For the second time in 2 weeks, she spoke those 2 words and changed the direction of everything. Yuna filed the motion the next morning. By noon, Harrison Webb's office announced his withdrawal as counsel, citing professional obligations that prevent continued representation. Legal language for, "The ship is sinking and I refuse to go down with it." By 3 o'clock, Vivian hired a full defense team from one of the largest firms in the country. Not a fixer, a defense army. The kind you assemble not to win a narrative battle, but to survive a criminal one. The ground was shifting, and the woman who had been pushed off a building was the one moving it. The Lincoln Park apartment had become the new war room. Smaller than the Wilmette kitchen, but brighter, with morning light that filled the east-facing rooms and made the legal documents on the kitchen table look almost clean, as if the information they contained could be organized into something manageable, something that followed rules. It had been 5 weeks since the counterclaim was filed, 3 weeks since the criminal referral motion, 2 weeks since Harrison Webb abandoned the Parks, and in that time, the case had transformed from a civil dispute into something with its own gravity, pulling in witnesses, documents, and revelations that even Sojin's meticulous investigation had not fully anticipated. The discovery documents were the earthquake. Yuna's team had subpoenaed 10 years of records from the Hartley and Associates consulting account. What came back filled 11 boxes. Minji spent 4 days digitizing and cataloging every page. What emerged was not a consulting account. It was Vivian Park's private operating system, a financial architecture designed to fund the systematic elimination of threats to the Park family image. The account had paid Harrison Webb's firm over $3 million across 7 engagements over 10 years. 3 of those engagements corresponded to women. Priya Mehta was one, Nari was another. The third was a name no one recognized. Diane Calloway, 24, a graduate student at the University of Chicago who had dated Junwoo briefly 6 years ago. 3 months. Diane's academic record showed a sudden plagiarism complaint appearing 1 week after the relationship ended, filed by a professor who had received a $30,000 donation to his research fund from a Park family charitable trust 2 days before the complaint was submitted. Diane lost her fellowship, left the university, moved to Portland. She was now working as a bookkeeper, living a life that bore no resemblance to the academic career she had been building before Vivian decided she was a problem. 3 women, 3 erasures, 3 versions of the same machine across a decade, from academic sabotage to legal destruction to physical elimination. The escalation was clinical. By the time Vivian reached Nari, the machine could stage a fake video, engineer a public humiliation, commission a push from a 47th floor terrace, erase security footage, and rewrite the event as suicide, all in a single evening. Nari read the Diane Calloway file at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning. She read it the way she had learned to read everything in the past 6 months. Slowly, completely, with the specific attention of a woman who understood that every document she absorbed was another brick in the structure that would either protect her or bury her. When she finished, she set the file down and looked at Sojin, who had been sitting across from her in silence for 30 minutes, watching her read. 3 women, she said, that we know of. Diane was 24, a student. She didn't even date him for a year. 3 months. And Vivian destroyed her academic career over 3 months. Vivian doesn't calibrate her response to the threat level. She calibrates it to her tolerance for deviation. Any woman who isn't the one she chose is a deviation, and deviations are eliminated. Nari thought about that. Calibrate. Deviation. Eliminated. The language of systems, not families. The language of a woman who had married into a crime organization 30 years ago and had absorbed its operational logic so completely that she applied it to her son's romantic relationships, with the same efficiency that the syndicate applied to territorial disputes. Junwoo knows, Nari said. Not a question. Junwoo has known since Priya, possibly since Diane. He knows what his mother does. He has always known, and he has never once intervened to stop it. Because he doesn't care. Sojin was quiet for a moment. The morning light caught the scar at his temple. Because caring would require him to confront his mother, and Junwoo has never confronted anyone with more power than him in his entire life. He is a man shaped entirely by the loudest voice in the room. When that voice was yours, at the beginning, he was tender. When it became Vivienne's, he was compliant. When it became mine, after the gala, he was terrified. He does not have convictions. He has acoustics. Nari almost smiled. Almost. Acoustics. He amplifies whatever reaches him loudest. It's why he could bring you soup and insure you for $500,000 in the same month. Both instructions came from different sources, and he followed both without experiencing the contradiction. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, a dog barked somewhere in the neighborhood. A car passed on the street. The ordinary world continuing its ordinary business. Yuno wants to offer Junwoo a deal, Sojin said. Nari's eyes sharpened. What kind of deal? Testimony against Vivian in exchange for reduced exposure on the criminal charges. The state's attorney is interested. Junwoo is the weakest link in the chain. He knows everything, he participated in everything, and he has the least loyalty to anyone other than himself. If he flips, Vivian's defense collapses. You want him to betray his mother. I want him to tell the truth. Whether that constitutes betrayal depends on your definition of loyalty. And if he says no? Then the criminal case proceeds without him, and he faces the same charges as Vivian. Conspiracy, fraud, witness tampering, obstruction. The insurance policy alone carries potential charges of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, with a maximum sentence that would ensure he never wears a tailored suit in public again. Nari stood, walked to the window. The Lincoln Park street was green and leafy in the July afternoon. Children rode bicycles on the sidewalk,
a woman pushed a stroller past the apartment building. The world that existed outside this kitchen was so normal, so fundamentally uncomplicated,
that it felt like a different planet from the one Nari had been inhabiting for 6 months. "Offer him the deal," she said. "Not because he deserves mercy, because the fastest way to dismantle what Vivian built is through the sun she built it around. She spent 30 years protecting him. He's going to be the thing that brings her down." She turned from the window, looked at So-jin. "And I want to be in the room when he decides." So-jin held her gaze. The morning light was on her face, on the scar above her eyebrow, on the gap between her front teeth, on the dark eyes that had once looked at the world with the open trust of a woman who believed in the basic goodness of the people around her, and now looked at it with something harder but not colder, wiser. The eyes of a woman who had been pushed off a building and had climbed back up and was now standing at the top, looking down at the machinery that had tried to end her. "You'll be in the room," he said. His phone buzzed. A text from Yuna. "State's attorney confirmed. Meeting with Junwoo's counsel tomorrow at 10. They're ready to talk. Tomorrow." The word sat in the kitchen between them like a held breath. Tomorrow Junwoo Park would sit in a room with attorneys and investigators, and the woman he had insured for $500,000, and he would choose. His mother or his freedom? So-ji knew which he would choose. Junwoo always chose the loudest voice. And right now, the loudest voice in the room was the sound of prison doors closing. The meeting took place in a conference room on the 14th floor of the Cook County State's Attorney Building on a Friday morning in late July. Long table, fluorescent lighting, no windows. The kind of room where deals were made and families were dismantled. Junwoo sat on one side, navy blazer, open collar, the expression of a man who had not slept in weeks. His new attorney sat beside him. Across the table, Yuna Pak, her face giving nothing away. The assistant state's attorney, Teresa Navarro, who had spent 15 years prosecuting financial crimes and looked at Junwoo the way a locksmith looks at a lock. And beside Navarro, in a chair she had requested and earned, sat Nari. She wore a white blouse and dark trousers, the thin white scar above her right eyebrow visible in the fluorescent light. Her hands resting on the table, steady, open, still. She did not look at Junwoo when he entered.
She let him settle into the fiction that this meeting was between attorneys, and that the woman across the table was incidental. Then, she looked at him. Junwoo's water cup paused midway to his lips, his hand trembled, a small oscillation someone who didn't read bodies professionally might have missed. But Nari read bodies professionally. She tracked the tremor, the tightness in his jaw,
the way his kind eyes could not hold hers for more than 2 seconds. He was afraid of her. Not the attorneys, not the charges. Her. The woman with a scar he had helped create, and composure he could not match, and the devastating patience of someone who had survived everything he could do, and was now waiting for him to decide how he wanted to lose. Yuna laid out the offer. Full testimony regarding Vivian's operations, the engagement party, the fake video, the payment to Declan Marsh, the insurance policy, and any additional operations, including Priya Mehta and Diane Calloway. In exchange, reduced charges, cooperation credit, no contest on civil claims. Junwoo's attorney asked standard questions about immunity scope and sentencing guidelines. 20 minutes of legal mechanics, while the actual decision, the human one, waited beneath the surface. "We'd like a moment," the attorney said. The room cleared. Neri was the last to leave. At the door, she stopped. "Junwoo."
He looked up. His eyes were red, not from eye drops this time. "You brought me soup," Nari said. Her voice was quiet, factual. "You remembered my coffee order." You proposed with a ring I thought meant someone finally saw me. She paused. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because 3 women had their lives dismantled by the same machine, and not one person inside it ever said, stop. You knew about Priya.
You watched your mother destroy a 27-year-old teacher and came home and ate dinner at her table. You knew about Diane, and then you met me, and you did it again. Junwoo's head dropped. I didn't push you, he whispered. No, you insured me. That's worse. Pushing is an act. Insurance is a plan. You monetized my death before it happened. Testify. For Priya, for Diane. For every woman your mother decided didn't fit. She held his eyes. And for whatever part of you sat with your grandfather and actually meant it. She left. In the hallway, Sojin leaned against the wall, 3 steps from the door. He had been here the entire time. He's going to talk, Nuri said. How do you know? Because he's afraid. Afraid people always talk. 12 minutes later, Junwoo's attorney opened the door. My client is prepared to cooperate fully. Junwoo talked for 3 hours and 47 minutes. Dates, account numbers, Phone records, names, the fake video, Vivian showing him the actress's audition tape, the insurance application, signing it knowing what double payout for falls meant on the 47th floor. The 18-second call. Priya. The fabricated emails. Diane. The bribed professor. Each operation delivered with the flat exhaustion of a man emptying a decade's worth of secrets. He signed 14 pages. His hand shook on the last one. Nari stood. Junwoo looked at her. One final look between 2 people who had shared a life that never existed. His eyes were empty. The eyes of a man who had stopped amplifying other people's voices and discovered his own had nothing to say. She walked out, through the lobby, into July sunlight. Sojin was on the courthouse steps, eyes closed, face tilted toward the sun. The first time Nari had seen him not calculating the next threat. She sat beside him, 2 feet of warm concrete, same distance as the care facility steps 9 months ago. It's done. Not yet, Vivian hasn't been arrested. Monday, Yuna says Monday. 3 victims, cooperating witness. A decade of records. And then? Then the legal part is over, the rest takes longer, she almost smiled. But I'd like to find out how long. Seojin opened his eyes, looked at her. 9 months ago, a woman he did not know sat beside him on cold concrete and asked about his grandmother's name. She had simply sat down because a person was hurting. And sitting down was what you did. He had spent 9 months trying to repay a debt that was never a debt. And through all of it, the gala, the lawsuit, the betrayal, the discovery, he had never told her what she already knew. Nari, on the steps that night, I recognized you. Not your face, something deeper. Something I'd been looking for without knowing I was looking. And every day since, I've been terrified that if I said this out loud, you would leave. And if you left, the world would go back to making no sense. Nari looked at him, at the scar, at the jaw that was always clenched and was now, for the first time, not. At the dark eyes showing something they had never shown anyone else. Not authority, not strategy, just hope. Raw, unprotected, terrifying hope. She reached across the 2 feet of warm concrete. Her hand found his, fingers interlaced, the way they had in the hotel corridor after the gala. Carefully, deliberately, with the understanding that this contact was not casual and would never be. I'm not leaving, she said. I fell 47 floors and survived. I was erased and came back. I was sued for $25 million and filed a counterclaim. I sat across from the man who ensured my death and watched him choose his freedom over his mother. She tightened her grip. You think a feeling is going to scare me away? His composure broke, not visibly, the way ice breaks in spring. A quiet shift, a release of something held rigid so long the release was almost inaudible. But Nari felt it in his hand, the permanent clench, the readiness, the refusal to relax, dissolved. His hand softened, his fingers stopped gripping and started holding. They sat on the courthouse steps in July sun, while inside, the machinery that would arrest Vivian Park churned through its procedures. They did not discuss the case or the future. They sat in the irreplaceable silence of two people who had survived separate forms of falling and had landed, against every probability, in the same place. A place that felt, for the first time in both their lives, like solid ground. Subscribe and turn on notifications not to miss our next story. Share your thoughts in the comments and inspire others.